Welcome back. This time we're once again talking about Captain America Civil War, but this time we're going for spoilers. Yeah, this is going to be my more in-depth analysis of the movie, discussing things that I couldn't talk about in my spoiler-free review because obviously it would spoil the movie. If you haven't seen Captain America Civil War yet, I recommend you not watching this video. If you'd like, I'll put a link to my spoiler-free review so you can watch that, and then go see the movie, and then come back and watch this video. So, if you don't care about spoilers, I guess you can stick around, but otherwise, from here on in, we're going to be in spoiler territory. So, Captain America Civil War. As I said in my spoiler-free review, I really like this movie. It's amazing that 13 movies into the MCU, Marvel can still pump out really good movies. This is a very well directed, very well written, very well acted film. And it's beautiful to look at, even when the action's not happening, and when the action is happening, the choreography is great. The way it's edited is not too jumpy like a lot of action movies these days. Pretty much from a technical standpoint, the production values here are just amazing. And credit definitely has to go to the directors and the writers. In this case, that's Anthony and Joe Russo in the director's chairs, and Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, screenwriters. All of them were involved in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and will be involved in Avengers Infinity War in a few years. Let's get into it now. Starting at the end first. That's not how I usually do things, but that's how we're going to do this. When I was leaving the theater and walking back to my car, I felt pretty conflicted about this movie. And it took me a while to really figure out why. At first I thought it really had to do with the fact that I had just spent 2.5 hours, most of which involved my favorite superheroes on screen battling it out. I mean, yes, they have the visual aspects, just the visceral action enjoyment is there. I mean, it's just fun watching everyone use their powers, and everything was so well choreographed. The action was set up so well. The set pieces, once again, wonderful direction and acting. But at the same time, you can't be terribly happy about watching your heroes fight each other. They're supposed to be fighting the bad guys. So, on some level, there is a governor on the amount of enjoyment I can have with a movie like this. So at first, that's why I thought where my problems were. But as I continued to think about it, though, I came to a different realization to why I was conflicted. And that's because the Avengers essentially lost. I mean, it's pretty much a total defeat for the Avengers. Zemo, played by Daniel Bruhl, basically set out to destroy the Avengers, and he was successful. The Avengers are no longer existing at this point at the end of the movie. I mean, basically the only defeats that Zemo had was the fact that no one on the Avengers side died, and the fact that he was kept from committing suicide by Black Panther. So yeah, this is an utter defeat for our heroes. And that's almost unheard of in a movie like this. I think it is unheard of. And a byproduct of the Avengers losing is the fact that this is a very open-ended conclusion to this film. I'm not sure if I'd go as far as to say it's a cliffhanger, but this is really the first film out of the 13 that doesn't feel like it has truly resolved the issues that it raised during the course of its story. Even Age of Ultron, with all of the destruction of Sokovia, and you know that things are going to happen because of that. But it still concluded the central storyline, which is Ultron was destroyed. In this one, the bad guy is Zemo, and yes, he's captured and put in prison, but again, he won. The Avengers are broken, scattered, and running from the law. So, yeah, this is a very open-ended conclusion to this film, and I think that once again led to some of my conflicted feelings. looking forward, it'll be a little interesting. I mean, we've got probably 2 years until we're going to have any kind of resolution to this situation. This November we get Doctor Strange. That seems to be a pretty standalone origin story for that character. Then into 2017 we get Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which I figure will, if it connects at all, will be connecting to the Infinity Stones and Infinity War more so than the fact that the Avengers are no longer fully active. Then we have the Spider-Man Homecoming, which, if you believe the rumors, apparently Tony Stark will have a role in this. But again, I don't think it's going to touch too much on the Avengers, with Peter Parker being one of the few that was able to go back home. And then we have Thor Ragnarok, which again is going to be taking place, assumably mostly off-world, and setting up things for Infinity War. So the first time we're going to have any real shot of some kind of connection to this would be in February of 2018, when we have the Black Panther movie, and with potentially Steve, but definitely Bucky, there in country, and them sort of alluding to that there are problems arising from that. But it could be all the way to when we get Infinity War Part 1 that we get any kind of real resolution to the current situation. So it's funny. During the course of the movie, Spider-Man makes a comment about Empire Strikes Back. And I was talking with a good friend of mine. He and I like to digest these movies and kind of bounce ideas back and forth. And I was really looking forward to talking to him after we had both seen Civil War. And he made a really good point. And he said, basically, this is the Empire Strikes Back of the MCU. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. I mean, you've got that open-ended situation, sort of a cliffhanger. I mean, I think that one had a little bit more of a specific cliffhanger. You had Han being frozen in carbonite, and as I pointed out, and he hadn't even thought about, we do have Bucky getting frozen at the end of this movie. So yeah, a few more little connections there. But yeah, this is definitely a movie that it has its own story, but the repercussions of that story, we're going to have to wait a number of years to see where it ultimately goes. So that's sort of the broad strokes on why I was a bit conflicted as I was leaving this movie. So I do want to get into some specifics. I think this video is going to be a bit longer than I was expecting. But if you're still here, hopefully you'll stick around for a little bit longer. So basically from this point on, I'm going to kind of go in chronological order of what happened in the film, and talk about some of the scenes that really stuck out to me. A few of the small issues I had story-wise. Even in a great movie, you do have some problems, so I'll mention those. But starting at the beginning, we have the flashback to 1991 with the Winter Soldier being sent on this mission, and I'm pretty sure anyone that had thought about this for too long, I would assume realized very quickly that the people in the car were Tony's parents. After that, we jump to present day. We pretty much figure out that it's been about a year since the events of Age of Ultron. I did like that we got to see some of the team dynamics with this new team, with Wanda and the others, and Sam with his little drone thing. And it was a good way of kind of introducing us to the new team in action and showing what they could do. Of course, the villain in this is Brock Rumlow, a holdover from the Winter Soldier. And honestly, going into this movie, I really thought he was going to probably be the main villain. Then he blows himself up. And I have to say, the issue with that is maybe Wanda could have done something a little different, and not the result wouldn't have ended up with those relief workers being killed in that building. But I'm pretty sure if she had done nothing, a lot of people on the ground would have died. And I'm surprised it wasn't at least mentioned. She saved a lot of people. I think more people would have died on the ground than they would have died in that building, but that's just my supposition there. So, of course, this leads to Ross presenting the Sokovia Accords, and once again, I don't want to compare too much to Batman v Superman, but I did, on one aspect, I did like the fact that it wasn't just this one thing that led to this. You have the Sokovia, you have New York, D.C., You know, in Batman v Superman, you had the huge battle, and Metropolis killed presumably thousands of people, and they were worried about a few drug lords or warlords in Africa. This made a bit more sense. That being said, some of the situations that they were blaming the Avengers on, it didn't quite make sense. I mean, New York had nothing to do with the Avengers. I mean, they basically saved the world. Sure, there might have been some collateral damage, especially with the Hulk going around, but I think that was on the scale of friendly fire versus alien fire. I think the Avengers would come out on that equation pretty well. DC was Hydra and Shield. That was just Steve kind of just, saving the day again. Once again, the numbers of people saved versus the number of people who might have gotten killed with collateral damage, I think they can sleep okay with that. And I didn't actually think of this until right before I came on video. It's kind of funny that they want government control again over the Avengers, when those two instances in particular can be blamed on S.H.I.E.L.D., which at the time that those events happened was the government control over the Avengers. So, there, at least of the 4 examples that they've shown so far, are shown in this, it's basically 2-2 with Avengers being blamed versus the government agency over the Avengers to blame. So, just saying. But I will say, if we are going to have our heroes battling it out against each other, at least it felt within character. Obviously, the main pro-government person being Tony. And I thought it was interesting, of course they had sort of the manipulative scene where he meets the mother of the kid that was killed in Sokovia, and then he makes his little speech about the kid and how he died while they were kicking ass. I can understand why he would say that. I don't think it's factually true, because if you watch that building collapsing, that had nothing to do with them battling Ultron. That had to do with Ultron lifting a giant rock into the air to destroy all of humanity. But since it's obvious Tony has a lot of regret over that because of his help in creating Ultron, I can see some transference there. So it's understandable, but I still wanted to point it out. And once again, I have to credit my friend, because this is something he pointed out, because he actually had time to rewatch a lot more of the previous films than I did. But going all the way back to Iron Man 1, when Tony makes his speech where he's about to announce that they're going to stop weapon manufacturing, he talks about having to take responsibility for your actions. So, there is that thread that if you follow the character, it can make sense that he's making this decision. And obviously everything that happens that's happened to Steve, especially with S.H.I.E.L.D., it's understandable that he would want to have nothing to do with this. They do a pretty good job of, both sides having a point. Because, you can see Steve, if a problem needs to be solved, then I'm just going to go out there and do it. And there's a bit of a cowboy attitude to that. So I can see, you could go either way. Obviously, this film's a bit skewed towards Captain America. I mean, it is a Captain America movie. But I thought they did as good a job as they were going to get with the storyline as it was, to have both sides make sense. Obviously, pretty much when we get to the bombing in the UN, the emotions pretty much trump any logic that we have left. We have Black Panther upset that his father was killed. We have Steve upset that everyone's blaming Bucky. We have Iron Man upset that Steve is siding with Bucky. Basically, at this point, everyone's emotions get the better of them, and there we go. Did want to touch on a little bit, I have to say, Peggy died. I mean, that as sort of manipulative as that scene was, with Sharon making the speech that seemed to be right on point to prove Steve correct in his thinking. it was surprisingly poignant. I mean, it was this, it was a character that we've, grown through the first Captain America movie, through 2 seasons of Agent Carter. I mean, it hit a lot harder than I really thought it would. So I have to mention that. I was a little surprised that Sharon's identity was a secret to Captain America. I thought that was, this sort of caught me a little off guard. Speaking of being caught off guard, after the bombing, I did not expect the fact that Bucky's identity as the Winter Soldier to be public knowledge. That shocked me. That shocked me almost more than any other revelation during the course of this movie. I didn't see that coming. So that really took me by surprise. Now, you have the great chase scene with Steve and Sam and Black Panther, and that whole scene's great. That's just a great action scene, which then leads us to the detention center in Germany, and that scene, which ultimately leads to another great action sequence when Bucky is reprogrammed. But that whole sequence with Bucky being interviewed, and Zemo is up to something, but you don't really know what, and then he's trying to reprogram him. The tension during that scene was so thick. That's just great direction, great writing, great acting. I was just, oh my God, what's going to happen during that whole sequence? That was just amazing. Just from a sheer movie-making standpoint, that's right up there. Then, of course, Steve gets Bucky. We get to the end of film, the end of credits sequence from Ant-Man. We get to that moment where the sides are starting to form, and that's now the Civil War is here, and my God, speaking of poignant moments, the scene with Vision and Scarlet Witch at Avengers HQ, holy crap. That was just 2 really good actors putting on 2 amazing performances. That was just brutal. And I loved how they just kind of hinted at this kind of budding romance between Scarlet Witch and Vision. It worked. It just completely worked for me, and I loved seeing Vision unsure of himself. It was such a great character moment, and Paul Bettany just nailed it. So I loved all of that. And then this is the one moment. Anytime you have this movie where you have people battling against each other, friends battling against each other, there's always that one moment. It's like, if they just talked, they could have solved a lot of problems. This is that moment. Obviously, at this point, we realize that people are being manipulated. We don't really know why. At this point, we think that Zemo is trying to get these other super soldiers. And that was a great red herring. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. But there's this moment where I think it's Sam says to Steve, shouldn't we call him? And he's like, even if he could, he can't help us. He's not going to listen to us anyway. So it's kind of a cop-out. It's like, at least make the call to try. I would have liked to see that. Even, obviously it wouldn't have worked. Otherwise the movie wouldn't have happened the way they wanted it to. But that's the one moment where it's like, if you just talked a little bit more, we wouldn't have had so many stupid decisions down the road. But for the most part, again, the characters are what they're doing. Even if it's wrong, it's understandable because of their characters and how we've learned about their characters over the course of the previous movies. But that was the one moment where I was like, one other thing I do want to mention, the kiss between Sharon and Steve, I don't know, it honestly just didn't work for me. It seemed odd timing, especially since Peggy's death was just happened. I know they were just trying to give Steve some kind of romance because he really hasn't since Peggy back in World War II. But it just came across, to me, it came off as a little forced, and it just was like, it didn't really fit either character to me at all. Now I have to admit, in fan fiction, I do read a decent bit of MCU fan fiction. I'm kind of a Steve Darcy Lewis fan. I think that's a good pairing. So maybe I'm just biased. I'd like to see Darcy show up into an Avengers movie and take Steve out on a date or something. I don't know. I'm going way on a tangent now. But the kiss it just didn't work for me, and I just wanted to mention it as something that I wasn't a huge fan of in the movie. Of course, this leads to our final big showdown. We get the introduction of Spider-Man, which I have to say is amazing. Tom Holland nails it. When I first saw him, I'm like, oh my god, he's so young. Which I have to admit, it was a little weird that Tony was going to take him to knock down, drag out with a super assassin, and Steve Rogers and the Scarlet Witch and whoever else comes out. It just seemed a little odd that he was taking this. I know he's not a kid, but compared to everybody else, Wanda would be the next youngest person. So yeah, it did seem a little odd that Tony was bringing him to this war zone. But I have to say I'm glad he did, because Spider-Man was excellent in this movie. Just so much fun. It's a great portrayal, the great humor, the great action. I had concerns about him when I saw him revealed in the trailer. I really thought his costume seemed a little cartoony, almost. The CG wasn't great. And I hate judging CG on a trailer, but considering this was like his big reveal, I would have thought, they would have had, it perfect. But I had no complaints with him in this movie. He was excellent as a character, the action, and of course the overall scene with everyone battling out at the airport is amazing. I love how they paired them off. Once again, you had Vision versus Scarlet Witch. Those are the only two that really could handle each other. And then with the added little angst of their budding romance and them finding themselves on opposite sides. Not to harp on it, but to compare it to the Steve Sharon kiss. These are two characters who have not seen each other in 2 years. Wanda and Vision, they've apparently been living together at Avengers HQ for the last year. So even though we haven't actually seen it on screen, we know that they've been interacting. And then you had Natasha and Clint battling it out, or at least putting on a good show. Ensuring that one didn't affect the battle for the other side, but not really, going there all at this. Just kind of, Wanda has her little throwaway line. You're holding your punches. Pretty much everything about this was really just everything was great. You had Ant-Man becoming Giant Man. I think that's how he's referred to in the comics. I'm not really sure, but that was awesome, and I'm so glad they did not spoil that in the trailers. That was just amazing. And then the kind of the action culminating with Rhodey getting injured. I didn't think he was going to get killed, especially since they shown that in the trailer. I wish they hadn't. That would have been a great thing to not know going in, because that whole battle you're kind of just waiting. Okay, when is Rhodey going to get shot down, and who's going to do it? It turns out it was Vision. So kind of a friendly fire thing. And then, so that whole sequence was great. And then, of course, it leads to Steve and Bucky escaping and going to Russia to try to stop Zemo from waking up the super soldiers. And it's about this time, I think, when Zemo makes his call to the hotel that results in the discovery of the body. And at that point, I was like, why did he do that? But I really wasn't overly concerned with it. We have the whole Bucky Steve thing going on, and it's I filed it away and didn't really think too much about it at the time, to be honest. And then we see our heroes that were left behind in the prison. Tony gets word of the body being found and realizing that he'd been duped and that Bucky really had been framed. So he sets off to the Russian complex as well, and he's followed by Black Panther. So you at this point you're kind of thinking, okay, well Steve and Tony are going to reconcile, and then of course they'll have to deal with the revenge-seeking Black Panther. And this is the one moment where the trailer really did kind of ruin part of the movie, and that is that we still at this point had not seen the really cool knockdown drag out between Steve, Bucky, and Tony. So it's like, okay, something's going to have to happen for them to start fighting again. But I didn't really want to overanalyze it as I was watching the movie. I just wanted to let it happen. So once again, I sort of just filed that away. Tony, they have their reconciliation, and they go to where the super soldiers are, and they're dead. And I did not see that coming at all. That's when we realized that the red herring was a red herring, and I went, holy crap, where is this going? I have no idea anymore. Oh, well, for a few minutes at least. And then we, quickly realized that they're about to show the video of Bucky killing Tony's parents. And talk about intense. This, again, an excellent fight. I mean, the whole battle between those three is amazing. But it's not one that you can truly enjoy, because at this point we know for a fact that everyone's being manipulated. And why? Zemo is trying to destroy the Avengers. There's a point where even Tony, he realizes that, yes, they've all been manipulated. He's being manipulated, and he doesn't care. I mean, that one line where he goes, but he killed my mother. Or he killed my mom. I'm like, holy crap, I'm watching this like 3 days before Mother's Day. I mean, that was intense, and it was just knife in the heart. Again, the acting all around was great, and you have the whole battle, and Zemo essentially wins. I did have one question about this scene, though, and I hope to watch this movie again. I'm probably going to watch this movie multiple times again. But there is the moment where Zemo's they first confront him, and they ask him, is this about Sokovia? And he says, no, it was already a failed state before you ever got there. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, Sokovia's off the list. Why is he seeking revenge? My mind started thinking, where else could this be going? And of course, we find out that it really was about Sokovia. His family was killed. So there might be, a little nuance to the conversation that I missed. I asked my friend about it. He wasn't sure either. So if it's there, we apparently both missed it. It seems odd that upon that confrontation that he would deny the reason, and when it basically is, it seems almost kind of just semantics that it wasn't about the government, but it was about his family. He didn't care about the country. He cared about. It seemed odd, and that's the one thing about this movie I'm not 100% clear on at this point, and I hope it will get cleared up in future viewings. But if you have a better grasp on that scene and why he said what he did, let me know in the comments, please. I would really like to know. And then the movie ends. Everyone's either a wanted criminal or a fractured team, and now we have to wait, presumably, almost 2 years or a full 2 years until we find out what's going to happen next to our heroes. Obviously, I've talked about being conflicted after seeing the movie. I've talked about some of the issues I had with it. That's fine. I mean, like I said, I left that movie feeling conflicted because, again, as I said earlier, I was utterly surprised that essentially our heroes lost. I think it took me a while for that to really sink in and go, they lost. That all being said, I love this movie. This is a fantastic movie. From a technical aspect, from a story aspect, from basically everything you would want from a movie like this, it delivers. This is an excellent movie. Not really ready right now to try to rank it in the scheme of things, but I'm sure it would be very high on the overall MCU list. It's an excellent movie. Please let me know what your thoughts are on anything that I've said in this analysis. Whether you agree or disagree, would love to know what you think. You can always subscribe to my channel. You can look at my other reviews. And until next time, you might want to take a break after this long video, but until next time, I'll see you at the movies.